it can be scary if you don't understand it. It's really no different than any other tool that you have, right? It's like a hammer or a wrench. Its tools are there for you to use when you need them. When you don't need them, don't use it. The future of AI and optometry, to me, is going to be very powerful. We're a small profession, and the only way we get better and the only way we can progress is if we work together or we utilize tools to help us accelerate above what we typically should or could do. And that's where I think AI will help optometry quite a bit.
Hey there, it's Dr. Ryan Court, and I'm looking for North Carolina licensed optometrists or those interested in becoming licensed in the state of North Carolina to join my team. If that's you or somebody you know, reach out to me on social media or email me at ryan.court1@gmail.com. Now, enjoy today's episode. Welcome back, everybody. It's another episode of Ryan Reflects. My name is Dr. Ryan Court, and today I have none other than Dr. Will Toe on the show. Will, welcome.
It's good to be here, Ryan.
Yeah, I got this guy up early on the Pacific Standard Time because I'm on the other side of the country, but he is ready to rock and roll. And, if you don't know Will, you've probably been living under a rock. But for those who don't know Will, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Definitely a lot of stories from people who have met me, depending on which part of, I guess, my life, my career. The biggest thing I'll have to say is, I'm someone who just loves optometry. I've been doing this for a few years now, and a lot of people know me from my kind of Instagram handle, the Traveling OD, because I used to go around, particularly early in my career, traveling to a lot of different schools, different conferences, giving a lot of presentations, lectures, kind of showing people, a lot of different topics, clinical things, motivational things, and just kind of telling people how optometry is and how, in my perspective, how I feel like it should be. I tell people all the time, I do love optometry quite a bit. It's a big part of me. It has done amazing things for me. And it's something that I always want to think about how I want to leave it better than it was when I came in, and be able to show the beauty of optometry and for everybody else, because I want everybody to have that same kind of feeling and perspective about it that I do.
Yeah, pretty humble intro on yourself there, man. The reality is you have always been very much so involved in our profession. But I want to take a step back to like your early days. You were an optician before you went to optometry school. Is that correct?
Actually, to be honest with you, if you go even a little bit further than that, I've never not had a job in optometry. So I graduated from UC San Diego back in 2009, and it was kind of crazy times, during the recession there. And I remember it was crazy during the graduation ceremony. The actual people there, the professors, the administration, actually told people it's probably smart for you to go back to school, because this is probably one of the worst times to graduate since the Great Depression. Very motivating type of graduation, as you can
right. Spot on. Thanks for spending 4 years at our university and plugging some student debt along the way.
Yeah, and only to hear that right when you're about to walk the stage, right? And so what's interesting is I had wanted to originally be a dentist. That was the track that I was going towards. Not that I had any love for it, just I felt like it was interesting. It was something I could do. And I worked part-time as a dental assistant to try it out. And I felt like it was pretty fun. Fun, right? Dental. And then what happened was I applied, did not get in. And I figured, well, I have to wait another cycle anyways. And then I had a conversation with my brother at the time, who had worked part-time as an optician somewhere, and said, hey, have you ever thought about optometry? And which I had not. I have no prescription. I'm a plus 50, minus 50 in both eyes. I'm not wearing contacts. I've never had refractive surgery, which is very rare. And what happened, so I actually, at that point in my life, I think I've been to the optometrist once in my entire life by the time I was 20, 21. So the thought never occurred to me to be an optometrist. But the conversation I had with my brother was basically along the lines of, well, hey, look, you like helping people. You want to be your own boss, right? You want to own your own practice. So, you can do that in both dental and in optometry. But you really like getting to know people and talking to people. And you can't really do that as a dentist. It's a very one-way conversation. He kind of pushed me in, or at least kind of nudged me in that direction. And I thought, you know what? I have to wait anyways. So let's check out this optometry thing that I had no idea about. So I certainly didn't grow up wanting to be an optometrist, because I barely knew what it was. But once again, not a lot of jobs available in '09 when I graduated. So I actually found a job down in San Diego at the front desk, working front desk at an optometry office first. Did that, learned it. Was pretty interesting to me, playing around with insurance authorizations, eligibilities. It was very kind of logical type to me. And so I picked it up pretty quickly. After a few months, they said, well, you're kind of too smart to sit at the front desk all the time. How would you like to be a technician and be more involved with the patient care? Which I said, sure, let teach it to me. We'll see. Got really good at that as well, too. And a few months after that, they said, how would you like to be an optician? Because you have great people skills. You like to talk about eyewear, lenses. You can get very technical, but at the same time you can be very you make it interesting and fun when you're frame styling. And all right, let's try that. I was pretty good at that too, so it was fun for me. And I've always kind of felt since those moments, it basically became like, this is a really great profession, and I think that. It has a lot to offer to people at whichever stage you're at. You don't necessarily have to be a doctor of optometry, but it does a lot for people, and it can be something that's not just a passing job. It can be a career, no matter which stage you're in. So I was actually an optician for a few years because I actually decided to kind of stay and learn that craft a little bit more before I realized, you know what, I do want to take it to that next level. So let's go back to school, where I became an optometrist, and then afterwards, building all these practices, buying these practices. I think one of the things that made it easier for me to do what I've done is that I've done every job in optometry. And so it's allowed me to see those perspectives. I know the good, the bad. I know what you can get away with when the boss isn't looking. I know what causes your pain points. I know how to motivate people at every level, and doing all those different jobs, making lenses. At this point, I've told people I've pretty much only done optometry. I've done almost every job in optometry. Not really something you'll hear from everyone, but it's to me, that's what's given me that perspective of I get it. I get this industry, and I really do love this industry.
I recommend every single optometry student, pre-optometry student really, gets a job at a practice, has the ability to take a peek behind the curtains, work the front desk, work as a tech, hey, maybe even work in the optical to a certain capacity, because it opens up your eyes so much from all areas of just outside of being a provider. And so how did that experience help you go through optometry school with different perspective?
Well, as I said, I because I saw it all, so to speak, or I kind of saw behind the scenes of how a practice works. I've done most of the different types of jobs and roles and responsibilities. I did feel like it gave me quite a bit of an edge going into school, because I already knew what it takes to actually do optometry in the real world, so to speak.
Yeah.
Right. Nothing against, obviously, what the schools do. They have a difficult job, and it is getting more and more difficult every year to teach the content that's required to be a good doctor and also pass the boards, right? National boards. I was lucky is that I was able to kind of learn both at the same time, because if you've never worked in an office before, you kind of have to learn the way that they teach you, which is the MBO style of teaching, right? It's kind of like when you first learn to drive a car. You have to drive a certain way to pass,
10 and
right?
2, right?
10 and 2, look twice, all this stuff. And it's not that we don't do that. We certainly see that it's not quite the same. Once you get that license, you learn that the real world doesn't always follow those rules to a T. So you have to be able to be flexible where you can. And I think that's the same thing with anyone who's a student, pre-optometry. You learn what to do, which is important. But I think one of the things that gave me that different perspective is I also understood from the start that while I need to learn what to do, I also need to learn what not to do, what I'm not going to apply, what is here just to help me pass a test, but not really there for me to apply in my practice once I become a doctor. So it's an interesting thing. Back then we didn't have as much of the apps and resources, right? So I used to keep just a running list on paper of optometry ideas. Literally anything where I would just, even if I woke up in the middle of the night, think
like you did last night, right? We were just talking about that. Yeah.
Yeah. And just like what I would do when I have my practice, how I would practice, or something I would have in my practice. So I had this long list. And by the time I graduated, it was probably like 200 ideas long, right? And from throughout the entire time I was a student. And then I had an equally long list of, I will never do this in my practice. I will never do this. I will never do this. It was kind of interesting. And looking at that after graduation, some of those ideas are like, oh, that's terrible. You start crossing stuff out because you're like, what was I thinking when I was the first year? But a lot of it's like, wow, I'm glad I wrote that down because because I had a different mindset when I was pre-optometry or early optometry student from where I'm at now. And there's some things that I probably would have never thought of if I didn't write it down in that moment. So that's what probably the advice I give to a lot of students nowadays is learn what to do, learn what not to do. And even when I lecture, which I have not done as much since COVID, but when I lecture at the optometry schools, I always tell them it was a famous quote from that's used in medicine in their teaching institutions, and they basically say, look, every 5 years out of school, 50% of what you know is technically obsolete. That's why we have things like CE and whatnot, right? But that's also why sometimes it's difficult when some of the more established doctors will tell you, this is what I do, this is how I practice, because a lot of new grads and students will say, I don't know if I can do that. The world is just different now. So while I don't mind listening, I can't apply your knowledge to me. And so I've always told them to keep that in mind, even when they listen to me. Listen to what I'm saying, but choose what, the information you feel is relevant or will be relevant, but also write down the stuff that you're like, well, just because Will does it, there's no way I'm going to do that in my practice. And that's okay. You should be paying attention to both sides. And right now, I'm almost at that point where I'm a lot more years out, before, when I used to say it when I was a few years out, it's like, well, I'm still pretty relevant. So that's why I don't mind that I'm not really lecturing at the schools as much, because there's a lot of other new grads who have stepped up, which is great. I'll always give any advice for people who ask of it. And if they invite me over to school, I'll do my best to visit and give a presentation and lecture. But at the same time, I'm happy that we're always seeing newer, younger doctors who are in a position where they can talk to the students and pay it forward, right? I always say pay it forward, don't pay it back. That's what makes our profession so great. When I talk about the mentors I've had, every single one of them that took me out to lunch, dinner, gave me all this advice that people could have, or they could have charged thousands of dollars for. Really, really solid advice in terms of how to practice and how to run a practice. None of them ever said, you owe me. Like when you make it, you owe me. Every single one of them says, when you're in my position, you go find a student, a new grad, you teach them. That's how we get better as a profession. We keep paying it forward. We don't pay it back. So it's quite interesting.
That's incredible. And it's the truth. We have to keep evolving with the profession, educating those that are coming out, being a mentor, being resources. I find it interesting. So you made a running list, written down, pen and paper, of all your ideas.
Yeah.
How could you even conceptualize what it would be like if you had artificial intelligence in the world that we have now, to put in your ideas and then just start building out these models?
Yes and no. I do feel like there's something to using a pen and paper sometimes, right? AI,
Absolutely.
I think, is a great tool, and I think I think a lot of people are really scared of AI because it can be scary if you don't understand it. And I usually tell people take a 15 minutes to really watch some YouTube videos or just get a basic understanding, because it's really no different than any other tool that you have, right? It's like a hammer or a wrench. Its tools are there for you to use when you need them. When you don't need them, don't use it. I think that the future of AI and optometry, to me, is going to be very powerful. We're a small profession. No matter what people say, we're a small profession compared to the rest of healthcare. And the only way we get better and the only way we can progress is if we work together. And that's why, joining things like AOA is very, very important. Or we utilize tools to help us kind of, accelerate above what we typically should or could do. And that's where I think AI will help optometry quite a bit, not just in our clinical type of situations, but just to help us grow and to create resources to, help us in our scope battles and all these type of things. I think the CEO of NVIDIA kind of told it best. There's a really good interview that he did where somebody asked him just to his face, with AI emerging and becoming more and more prevalent, does that mean you're going to fire half of your employees and replace them with AI? Because that's what everybody feels is going to happen. And he kind of thought about it and he goes, you know what's going to happen? I'm probably going to fire half of my employees, but not because they're going to be replaced by AI, because there's going to be half the people out there that will refuse to use AI because they're too scared of it or they don't understand it. And the people I'll keep are the ones that understand AI and understand how to utilize it to make their work better and make their jobs easier and to make the job more efficient. So that was an interesting kind of perspective. I think he's absolutely right, where AI is a powerful tool, and you just like any other tool, you have to learn how to use it. You don't have to be an expert, right? There are people for that, who will build the tools, and the programs and the protocols that will help everybody else. But you need to at least understand it and be able to adopt it when it is relevant to you.
Yeah, it's only scary if you haven't taken the opportunity to learn about it. We're in the wild, wild west days of artificial intelligence. I mean, we really, truly are. Everybody's trying to get a position in artificial intelligence. Every company across the world is intrigued by it. I agree with you wholeheartedly, though. We're going to be able to utilize it as a tool in our toolbox. And the truth of the matter is, yeah, I mean, it's going to be a really nice way to supplement and amplify what we do. But I don't believe it's going to replace what we do as eye care professionals or even just the healthcare uh, profession at large, in the
Mhm.
healthcare community at large. I want to switch gears though here. So you finished up school and you've built a lot of, connections. You had all these mentors and you started your traveling OD days.
Yeah.
What in the world did that look like? Like, walk me through a week of
Yeah.
traveling OD Will Toe.
Oh, well, once again, different perspective. I think just because of the background I had and the experiences I had, that when I graduated, instead of going straight into clinical practice, I had the opportunity from many of the industry partners and representatives that I knew during school and
Hmm.
before school, to actually be a consultant and advisor and speaker, which not typical for a new grad that doesn't really have a resume that's built out for it. But I think I just happened to graduate at a good time, because what we had seen in the industry right before or while I was in school is that a lot of industry focus on practice owners, because that's where they can make money, right? They can sell their products, sell their services. And so that's where a lot of the focus had been for many, many years. But then more recently, around the time I was a student, there was a lot more investing in the students, because they realized, well, students are a little bit easier to access. They don't, you buy them a sandwich, they'll be happy, right? And
Pizza.
pizza, right? Things like that. And being able to talk to them at that early age, even though they're not in a position to buy your products or services yet, you take care of them when they're young. They will remember you when they're older and become practice owners potentially, right? So I mean, it was a smart move, and I like that they did that, because it means that there are more resources for students. But then you have this weird kind of funny area in between where you graduate, and instead you're maybe an associate, but you're not quite a practice owner. A lot of the industry partners didn't really know how to approach those people, because once again, practice owners, I know how to make money. I know what I need to do, take them out for lunch, show them some, CE resources, whatnot. Students, kind of just talk to them, make sure they know who you are and that you're ready to help. And then associates, even today, there's probably not as much resources as there should be for that kind of lost period, right? So once again, I graduated in a time when they started realizing maybe we should do more there in that space, or we need to try. So let's actually hire people instead of ones, as I said, who've been practicing for 15, 20 years who may not be relevant. Let's hire people who just graduated or recently graduated. And so that was a little bit of luck on my side that's what was happening. And so I was speaking for many companies at that point, once again, whether they were more CE based, more just kind of motivational talks to students and new grads, or practice management, things like that. And my background, even though at that point I had not owned a practice yet, I still knew enough how to run a practice and how
Hmm.
to, even instead of talking to doctors, sometimes I talked to staff, opticians, things like that. So I actually did that for a couple of years before I went back to practice and bought a practice. So a little bit more unique. And because of that, I was actually traveling to all these different parts of the country. I was probably traveling over 100,000 miles a year, quite a
Ooh.
bit. And I hit all my airline statuses, hotel statuses, everything, to the highest tier, titanium, platinum, every level of everything, quite a bit, just because that's what happens when you're in one of these travel based jobs, right? And that was pretty fun. When you're young, you're not married, you don't have kids, that kind of thing. It makes for a pretty fun time. And I was able to, kind of people saw me as, oh, you're the traveling OD. And actually in the beginning, it started off just as a hashtag because that's what people called me. You're the traveling OD. And then for a while, people are like, you should just make that your whole thing, because that's kind of how everybody sees you. And that's where that was born from. But nowadays, actually since COVID, not so much because I'm focusing on my practice more than anything else, but still do a decent amount of it, whether it's for personal or for work. Um, uh, once again, still got to maintain that airline and hotel status, right?
I mean, listen, you got married, and so once your wife was like, "Hey, listen, I like these." My wife is all she thinks she's a travel agent at half the time. She's coordinating Marriott points and airline points, right? You got to keep that status going there.
Exactly. And now the good news is she gets to join in on some of these too, right? Where
Exactly.
she goes, well, I don't know if I'll join you for your presentation. You can go do that. I'll be at the pool or depending on the area in the country, I'll be at the beach or the pool, right?
Be hanging out and enjoying the journey. So you did this, and during that time period, you're doing a lot of interaction with other doctors,
Mm-hmm.
and you're building in your head, most likely, at least this is my assumption, what does a practice look like for me? And I want to get into buying a practice or cold starting a practice. So walk me through that mindset because you ended up buying,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm curious why you did a purchase versus a cold start and what that looked like.
Well, yeah. I mean, at this point, I've done both, right? With all the practices I have. But in the beginning, yeah, I did purchase a practice, which I felt like I'm glad I did because especially with the experience I had, it allowed me to kind of hit the ground running type of thing.
Hmm.
Which, if I was in a situation where I didn't know as much, I think a cold start would make sense because it gives you time to learn things, right? You can learn as you go. So it's not necessarily I would say I'm not telling people that you must go for one or the other. It really depends on what you want and so where your level of business acumen is at the time, or just practice management. It doesn't necessarily have to be business in general, but and who you can surround yourself with to learn as you go, whether it's paid consultants or just doctors who are going to be great mentors for you. Um, for me, it made more sense to buy a practice because once again, I kind of had this goal of what I wanted, and I knew it would just take me so much longer if I were to do a cold start. And so one of the things I always felt about optometry is because I've worked only in optometry my whole life, even I'm not going to pretend I've been doing this for like 30, 40 years, like some people out there, but back in 2009, 2010, when I first kind of got started, it was very different from where it is today, 10, 15 years later. Right. I do feel like a lot of it, with the rise of private equity and more, consolidation of, corporate entities, it's, optometry has lost a little bit of that soul, that spirit, that made it more unique before. And I'm certainly not that guy who's like stuck in the ways of like, oh, I wish things were like how they were in the past, right? Things always move forward. That's the only constant in life is change, right? And but I do believe like optometry was more respected before. And I would love to do that. When people ask me all the time, like, what's your end goal? What are you trying to do with like, do you want to get 10 practices, 20, 100? Right? I have a friend who owns 100 practices in the Midwest.
Oof.
Trust me, it's doable, right? If you have that ambition and goal. But what I've told people, what's interesting is I would really love to make it so that there's a place for people who really care about their eyes. I feel like a lot of the places nowadays are just more of like, well, we're just trying to get you in and out as quickly as possible, get a prescription and get you into the optical, which is fine. I mean, it works. And for a lot of patients, that's all they care about, and that's okay. But I do believe that there should be a more elevated version of optometry, which I know a lot of people are doing in private practice in particular,
Hmm.
where for the patient who wants to take their time, for the one that's willing to spend more for better, there should be something for them. And I don't think there's a lot of that, or at least not enough of that anymore. There used to be a lot of that. And so if you were to walk into like a shopping center in America, you're going to see, budget options. You're going to see good mid-tier options. You don't see a lot of high quality options, not anymore. There used to be a couple of big brands I really respected back then. That was OSA, Optical Shop of Aspen, which doesn't really exist. I think they had dozens and dozens of locations 15 years ago. Now they only have one, I think, or two. And then Alori, which was a Luxottica brand that I actually thought was fantastic. which I think they realized it just didn't make as much money as the lens crafters model. So there wasn't anything wrong with it. It just wasn't as successful for them.
Yeah.
But I thought the Lori's were one of the most beautiful stores when I first walked into one, as as an optician, and I always thought, wow, this could be amazing if you do it right. And once again, I don't know exactly what happened to it. I wasn't privy to those conversations in Luxottica, but I just think they decided to focus more on, say, the lens crafters and the target optical model, which makes sense. They do a lot of good business there. But so I wanted to kind of make that, like, I want to be able to bring that kind of the beauty of optometry, the love of optometry back to the people, not just to the optometrists, but to the people who, there are plenty of them out there, and we all have those patients where we know that they're the ones that we love, the ones that like to collect glasses, the ones that wear the funky colors and the funky designs.
Oh,
And we're
yeah.
just happy that we're there for them, because otherwise they'd have to maybe go into some of the more generic places, which they would hate. So that's what I'd love to do with people. Whether I do it with 5, 10, 20, 100 practices, I don't know. To me, there is no end goal. If you asked me 10 years ago what I wanted, I would have told you, I think it's going to take me 20 years to get 2 practices. And so I did that in 2 years, essentially. So it's interesting because I keep hitting a lot of my goals quicker and sooner. So I don't know what my end goal is, because I keep reaching it, and then I keep having to push it further. And not to say I'm not happy where I'm at. I'm certainly not the type of guy who's like, I can't find happiness where I'm at. I always have to keep getting that high, right? That adrenaline junkie type of person. I'm certainly not that, but I do want to see where I can take it. I want to see where I can go with it. And I want to see what I can do, give back to optometry, because as I said, I feel like it's done so much for me. It's literally been my whole adult life, essentially.
Yeah. So from what I'm hearing though, too, you want your practice to be much more concierge in, opposed to like more of a transactional relationship that happens in a lot of facilities. And I respect that. So then when you decided you wanted to buy a practice, how did you find that practice? What did that conversation look like? I mean, I saw that was your initial practice that I think you and I had met when I was last in Northern California, if I remember correctly. Um, how did you go about that process?
Well, I mean, once again, that's part of that networking that you do, right? Prior to optometry school, when you're looking around, shadowing different doctors, I happened to work at a place, so I didn't need to do that as much down in San Diego, where I first kind of started. And then you just meet doctors who introduce you to other doctors, who introduce you to other doctors. You meet reps who introduce you to other reps and doctors. It's a very tight knit network. As I mentioned, optometry is not very big. I always laugh at when people say like, oh, there's too many optometrists out there, when you realize there's 45,000 of us total practicing. And I think medicals at 800, 900,000, right? Dentals, I think around 180,000. Pharmacies about 250,000. Like we're small. We're a very small profession. So for better or worse, we all know each other, right?
Yeah.
And so when you start being the person that just goes up to people and just, hey, my name's Will. I'm a student, or I'm a new graduate. I just want to say hi. Everyone told me you're a good person to meet. And then that person will tell you, okay, almost everybody will always ask the same 3 or 4 questions when they first meet you, right? It's like, okay, so where are you at in location wise? Like, are you in, North Carolina? Are you in California? Are you in Texas? Doesn't matter, right? Because even if the person you meet doesn't practice there, like I said, everybody knows they know somebody who does. So once again, if they can't help you, they will find somebody to help you, which is great that the profession does that. So you just start meeting a bunch of people in that sense, and you're not going to be best friends with everyone, and you may not always get their contact information up front, but as you keep putting yourself out there, going to different, as I said, national conferences, regional conferences, seminars, all these different types of events that happen, you start seeing that you bump into the same people over and over again. And at some point, even if you don't have somebody who introduces you, you can go up to somebody and say, I keep seeing you. I feel like I should know who you are. And I've actually done that to people, and I've had people do that to me, right? And it's not awkward, because it's like, we all get it. Right? We're all in this together. And as I mentioned, it's a small network of our profession. And I would say that actually, of the people that I have hired, like my associates, a lot of them I met at conferences. They didn't just apply to my Indeed post, right? But a lot of them I bumped into. I knew them as students. They knew me as students, all these type of things. And you just get to know people. And in that sense, you can always um, utilize that. And that's kind of where I did. I met these doctors who are looking to sell, or these doctors who know a guy who's looking to sell. And then you just make those introductions. You talk to them, you visit the practice. If it's a good fit and it makes sense, you look at, I don't even look at the numbers right away, because that's important. But I always like to go and just make sure is this somewhere I feel like I can work, right? Just the environment. Does it feel good? That gut check will help you out quite a bit in many
Yeah.
situations. And then the second thing I do is I look at the staff. Do they get along? Because if you see them bickering and stuff, you're like, okay, I don't want to deal with staff drama. I don't want to deal with having to replace half the staff once I take over. It's like, do they work well together? Do they like each other? Because that's a whole headache that you have to deal with if you just buy a practice based on numbers. It looks great on paper, but then it's kind of a mess, in terms of the daily operations, because the people just do not communicate and they do not work well together. So you're already spending time fixing that. So it's these type of things that you don't, yeah, there's a little checklist of what you look for, but just go there. Walk in there as if you were a patient. Don't even tell them who you are. See how the people go up to you, how they talk to you, not knowing that you could be their future boss. And you do that for a little bit, and you just get a good feel of like, is this a good practice or not? Oftentimes, as I said, that'll do you. That will help you out a lot more than just, hey, can you send me the P&Ls or the taxes so I can review them, right? As I said, that's important, but that's not the most important thing. Not up front, anyways.
Yeah, it's one thing to pass this, the metrics test, right? Of analysis of just the books and overall, like you said, profit and loss. It's another thing to pass a sniff test and walk in as a secret shopper. And if you get treated poorly, or you see others getting treated poorly while you're there, well, I can imagine you've declined opportunities because of that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that alone, if you ask most doctors, the number one pain point they have to deal with, or the number one
Hmm.
reason they would leave private practice or any other mode of practice, they will tell you it's dealing with staff, right? And dealing with staff drama. They're always fighting each other. They're always being passive aggressive to each other. These type of things, those will just, doesn't matter how great of a patience you have, doesn't matter how much money you made that day, it will ruin your day when you're just dealing with watching your staff just fight. And it's, it's so hard, because, you want to just tell them, like, or you just want them to just get along, but they just can't or won't. And, the toxic behavior of one person can certainly spread. And, I've definitely learned in my time as a practice owner that it doesn't matter how good of a salesperson you may have, that it doesn't matter how much money they generate for your practice. If they are toxic, the headache is not worth it. So that person needs to be replaced. And that matters more to me than anything else. So oftentimes when we interview people, I don't even ask them any questions up front about the job or talk about it for a little while, right? Let me just talk to you. Let me get to know you. What do you like to do? Where do you like to hang out? What do you, and sometimes people get a little bit weird because they don't expect those questions. But
Yeah.
look, as I said, I'm not trying to be your best friend, but I just need to make sure I can work with you, right? Above all else, it doesn't matter if you'll bring in $1 million to the practice. If I can't work with you and people can't work with you, and everybody else has to kind of tiptoe around you because they're scared of, saying the wrong thing, and which will set you off. That's not a good work environment. That needs to change. And it doesn't matter how good you are. I'm not saying you need to change, but this is just not a good fit, right? So that's by far the most important thing to me, is just the team, the staff, their ability to get along. That makes a huge difference to me before the numbers. As I said, the numbers we can always improve. There are always ways you can make a practice more efficient or more profitable, but the people, that's hard, because you can't change people, right? They're adults. They are who they are. So I hire based on personality. I buy practices based off of personality way more than I care about the numbers.
Yeah, one toxic person can sink a ship. I've seen it, and I've navigated those circumstances just like you have. Thanks for listening to part 1 of my conversation with Dr. Will Toe. Be sure to tune in next week for part 2, where we dive into navigating chaos in practice ownership, the role of teleoptometry, and Dr. Toe's closing thoughts on the future of optometry.